This week in IT SPARC Cast, Ubiquiti is tired of getting interrupted, Google wants to mend your code, and Synology finds out the definition of FAFO. Greetings and welcome to IT SPARC Cast News Bytes. I'm your host, John Barger.
And I'm your host, Lou Schmidt. Let's see what's going on right out there.
It's Monday, October 13th. IT SPARC Cast News Bytes is a digest of the IT news over the last week with insights, opinions, and a little sarcasm from two experts, each with over 20 years of experience working in IT or for IT vendors. And now, the News Bytes.
Wait a minute. We're experts?
So speaking of getting interrupted, so this is a really interesting piece of news that came out, and we always are keeping on top of what's going on with Ubiquiti. And Ubiquiti announced the UniFi Uninterruptible Power Supply. So they're getting into the UPS business. And I've got a few UPSs floating around here. And just as this is starting to come across my news feed, Lou threw a note over to me saying, hey, this is great. We should talk about it. I agreed. So they announced two new units. One is shipping today. That is the UniFi UPS Tower for $159. It's 1,000 volt amperes and 300 watts. This is 300 watts at half load. So this would be good for sitting under your desk, for sitting in your office somewhere to run an important computer system or some other mission critical system there. But they've also announced a 2U rack mount solution that'll be shipping later in October, so later this month, for $279. That is just over 1,400 volt amperes and with a 500 watt half rated battery. So 1,000 watts, but at half power would be 500 watts, which will give you about 8 minutes at that load.
Right. So the important thing to remember is these are high output but low capacity devices. Right. They're designed to give you just enough power to shut down gracefully or Correct. To endure a short power blip, which for my use case is perfect.
Right. And so that's a good point. This is not designed to keep your rack running, as Lou said. But the nice thing is that this integrates directly into the UniFi management system.
Yes.
And will provide messaging to all your other devices. And this will be really critical if you're running like the UniFi NAS, as an example, to shut down gracefully, but also your switches and your APs and then all that. But it also has standards built into it. So it's got an Ethernet port, plugs into the network for management. It also has Ethernet surge protection for, you can put one mission critical connection through it and in and out. But it also has built-in NUT support. So you can go out there and support third-party systems as well. So that's actually really, really nice. So they're playing the game, like a standard UPS, but they're also integrating it into their existing cloud environment. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. Now, from my standpoint, I've got a number of cyber-powered, other branded UPS systems, both in my rack and around the house. And I've always meant to set them up for graceful shutdown. And every time I look at the documentation, I just like, okay, I can do this, but I don't have time to do this right now. And maybe it requires a Windows system to be running, or maybe it's something else needs to be running and I need to set up a VM, or there's a process to this. If I could just plug it in and it gets found by my management tool, I say adopt and it's done. Oh my goodness. If you're running Ubiquiti, I think this is a must have.
I'm in the same boat that you are. I've got, I believe, a CyberPower on there. Good unit. CyberPower makes a nice unit. But it interfaces via a USB port. So it means it's got to go to a host somewhere that sends all this stuff. Now, I got a bunch of Raspberry Pi and single board computers lying around. I could easily do this. Wouldn't consume a whole lot of power. But who's got time for this?
That's the thing.
And I've got to tell you, I've already even though the tower is shipping, the 2U one is not yet. It's going to come more towards the end of the month. I've got my email in saying, tell me when this thing shows up, because this is just a much better idea. If you're going to go in with a system, I'd like to see more vendors do this.
Yeah.
Make it so you just plug it in and it sees it and it goes, it shows up.
What I would like to see is I'm gonna get one as well, and I would like to see if Once it triggers, I can then have it trigger other devices to shut down, because I've got like, VMware server and some other things that, I've got a couple other NAS, I got a couple Synology NASs plugged into it. Can I trigger them to shut down as well? That would be the really interesting part. I could get all of that to happen from that solution. That'd be really, really interesting.
What for me, I'll be interested to see, because the interface that Ubiquiti is using to talk to you is Ethernet, not USB. But I have a web power switch,
Yeah.
which is scriptable. So it's got a full-on Lua scripting engine in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, will Synology extend their system to allow you to talk to something like that and run a script on a power control? Now, it may be just their power control will allow this. I don't know yet. And if so, I may have to think about getting one.
Yeah.
Just because of the simplicity of operations. I mean, ain't nobody got time for this.
Well, speaking of simplifying operations, what's Google doing?
Wow. Okay. Originally, I was going to run this one as a CVE, but I got to tell you, this should be on the main line. So Google just announced a new AI that doesn't just find vulnerabilities; it rewrites code to patch them. Okay, this is something we were waiting for. Something, John and I have these discussions on the side when we're getting ready this. This is something we were really eager. We knew that folks were working on it. So Google's the first one really out the gate. They just showed off. Google DeepMind just unveiled CodeMender. And it's an AI agent that doesn't only find bugs, it rewrites the code to fix them and harden the entire code base. This came to us via Hacker News. So it detects patches, proactively refactors the vulnerable code so the entire classes of flaws are less likely to reoccur. So it moves from security to find and file to auto remediate and prevent, which is amazing. In 6 months of building, Google says it upstreamed 72 security fixes to open source projects, including repos of up to 4.5 million lines of code. So it does what it looks like Google's doing with this is they're going after securing the supply chain problems that we've talked about in previous CVEs and other episodes in projects that are going to welcome the upstream code patches because they can get to the source code. Nobody has enough time, and putting a machine on this is amazing. So it uses a deep think model based on an LLM critique that diffs proposed changes, checks regressions, self-corrects before submitting patches. So it won't even submit the patch until it's actually tested that it closes the security hole, which is really neat. So they're planning to roll it out to reach out to maintainers, critical OSS projects to offer CodeMender generated patches and gather feedback. So I would say we're sort of in the step one of turning this into a paid service. If you're willing to give somebody else access, Google access to your code base, but this is the killer application for open source. This is amazing.
I think that we've been saying all along that, the early targets, especially for AI and those agentic AI tools, is those repetitive tasks or tasks that involve large amounts of data that no human eyeball can look at and really find everything. And as you start to comb through it, you're going to get fatigued. You're going to miss things. The computer's not going to get tired, right? It's going to be able to go through that. And those patterns that it's looking for, it's not going to miss as easily as a human will. Humans get distracted, a phone call, a pretty girl walks by, whatever it is, you get distracted and you're going to miss something, and that's less likely here. You still have the possibility of hallucinations and other issues, and we still need to be checking it. But if you have multiple checks going on, multiple AIs doing checks, and then maybe a last human check on top of that, you're going to be in pretty good shape. So I'm really excited to see this. And I think that especially if you're talking about as we start to see more and more legacy code in languages where the people that understand those languages are retiring, the amount of lines of COBOL code that still exists, they're still running out there, and the number of people that understand that code is diverging so fast that you're going to need tools like this to keep that, or then maybe even eventually convert it to something more modern. That's that's going to be really exciting.
Absolutely. And it shifts the entire model to bug report and twiddle your thumbs to here's the bug, here's the fix, right? Which is why open source is absolutely the perfect place to try this out. But it will be interesting to see what Microsoft does in this space, because Microsoft has some of the key developer tools that many folks use to maintain and operate on their code, right? Not everybody does it in VI or Emacs or whatever code of the day fight you want to have. A lot of folks use coding tools from Microsoft. So the question will be, will Google allow you to integrate into those tools? And we probably need to dig a little deeper on that. And or will Microsoft offer a similar service with OpenAI or another Anthropic, for example?
They absolutely will.
So
absolutely.
this is
just the first of many.
Fantastic, though. This is exactly what we wanted to see. Speaking of things we wanted to see, let's revisit an old fight.
So, Lou, have you ever felt that sometimes you weren't being heard, or that you were yelling into the noise and you're just getting lost in that noise?
I'm married. No, just kidding. We have a great marriage, but
yes, I've met your wife. She's awesome. But here's the thing. Sometimes our voices are heard, and at one point, just as for those of you as old as Lou and I, on when Alderaan blew up, and there were millions of voices that screamed out, millions of nerds screamed out when Synology announced that they were limiting the types of drives that would be accepted in their 2025 models and newer to only those that they had vetted and that they were allowing. And those of us that were Synology fans, I've got two, Lou's got at least two.
I've got two, yeah.
That were, we were just like, well, I think the one I have a 2024 model, and then a 2018 model. Those might be my last Synologies. Well, it looks like they heard the cry and the pushback. I was already looking at other NASs that I wanted to investigate for whatever my next one might be. I had looked at the UniFi NAS. I had looked at True NAS. I had looked at building my own, all of those different things. But what's happened is, and this article is from Tom's Hardware, but we saw this in a dozen different places.
All over the place.
Synology is backed off on at least some of their models, which include the Plus series on the 2025 NAS models, but they are allowing third-party drives to be used after the 7.3 software update. Now, that being said, just as it was before, if you talk about the M2 slot, that still does require a Synology vetted M2 drive. But for the bays, those you can, once you get to 7.3, you can go back to your Western Digital, your Seagate, your whichever brand you prefer, and you can be able to go back and use those. So I think this is great news, and it shows that an angry mob of nerds can make the world change.
They're also doing something else that's really cool, and that is they're planning to reintroduce or beef up their third-party drive validation program. Now, it says here that they said to be developing a third-party drive validation program. I don't know if that's completely accurate, because they had third-party drives listed before. Yeah. So I don't know if this is a more consistent testing, whether they're going to upgrade firmware to add their features into these things, but they have pledged to create this program and continuously update the product compatibility list. So that is another another big win for us, I think.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I was trying to understand the motivations behind this originally. Obviously, the motivation was money, but like what was the main driver that pushed them through it? And the biggest thing I can think of is from our old space of networking is the optics for switches. And you can buy from Cisco, or you can buy from HP, or you can buy from Extreme, or you can buy a third party. And the price difference was sometimes 10x.
Shockingly different.
And granted, those vendors did, truly validate those, but they really did have a lock in at that point. And it's very, very often you would call in, I got errors, And the first thing they would check is through the CLI or the management interface or whatever, what was the manufacturer of those optics? And if they weren't, validated, like, I'm not going to help you until you put the right optics in. And then you put the right one in, and okay, now the problem's still happening. Okay, now we'll start looking at it.
Lou's tip: always buy a couple of the branded optics from the vendor.
100%.
Always.
And just go ahead and swap it before you even call them.
Absolutely.
Just do that. But my question is what's the next thing that might be coming from, and it's not just Synology, but think about that as you're choosing your vendors for any kind of software or hardware. We're seeing this with Canva right now, and they purchased, I think it was the Affinity suite of software, but that software has gone offline. You can't buy it right now as of middle of October, and it should come back at the end of October. But there's some theory that it might go to a subscription model. So as you're buying your software and your hardware, be thinking about the vendor and where it's going, and was there a recent acquisition, where they might be going, because I think that we're going to see something else from Synology, that they're going to put something else in place as an attempt to increase their monetization. That's what this was. This was a way to increase their revenue stream, and there's a reason they're looking for that increased revenue stream, and they're going to find another way to do it. Just my 2 cents.
As far as I'm concerned, if they offer a value add like a drive checking service or a subscription service where they monitor the firmware and optimize it or something like that, that would be a better model than having to buy their drives, in my opinion. Don't lock out your users.
So that is going to wrap up today's episode. I did want to share a little bit of feedback. So Larry reached out to me via email, and Larry is an IT director, and his comment was about the landlords that we talked about last week, and the landlords demanding access. So this is end user landlords, your employees' home landlords, demanding access to ADP or whatever other system that held their W-2s so that they could verify their income. And Larry was livid. He was all caps in a couple of places that this totally breaks your employee agreement if you give this out. He understands the pressure that people are on with the way the housing situation is right now. But if somebody asks so we as IT professionals and as our HR and legal partners need to be communicating to all of our employees that if anybody is demanding access into a work environment, that needs to come to HR and IT and legal for approval. Do not just start giving that out. And maybe that we as IT need to start putting additional security in place, 2-factor and things like that. If 2-factor's in place, then they're not going to be able to get in and such. So if you don't, you should already be using 2-factor.
Yeah, if you're not on 2-factor,
what are you doing?
Stop this replay. Go to your stuff.
Go set up, or multi-factor even better. But yes,
right.
Yeah. So, but
Holy
anyway,
crap.
Larry's right, and that's, I just wanted to read that out because he was, I could tell. I mean, there was like whole sentences that were all caps. He was livid as he was writing this email, and he's right. It's a total breach of what's appropriate here. So anyway, that is going to cover this episode. We couldn't do this podcast without listeners like you. We would love to hear what you think. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? You can send an email to feedback@itsparkcast.com or hit us up on X @ITSparkcast. You do like Larry, you can send us an email. If you're on YouTube, you can leave us a comment down below. We read every bit of feedback and every comment that we get. And if it's particularly insightful or interesting, or if you do a lot of capital letters, sometimes
all caps will get you in.
We'll read it out on the podcast, as long as it's safe for work and not too insensitive. We'll go ahead and do that. But so with that, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications. That way you never miss an episode. And with that, from the world of enterprise IT, take care.
Thanks for coming to spend some time with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
You mentioned fear. What are you so scared of?
My data. What will happen to my storage if the power goes out? Will it be safe?